Call to order the Brentwood Board of Aldermen meeting for September 4th, 2018. If you'd all rise, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Thornton,
Here.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Here.
Alderman Kramer,
Present.
Alderman Leahy,
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill. Here. Alderwoman Sims. Here. And Alderman Plufka is absent.
All right, item number 3 on tonight's agenda is the approval or amendment of tonight's agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to approval by acclamation? It will be so approved. Item number 4 on tonight's agenda, we have a public hearing regarding rezoning from light industrial to planned development overlay district for a property located at 200 Hanley Industrial Court. Lisa, are you going to tell us about that, or? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to gavel in the public meeting. I think that's a,
6:07.
it's something we do, Kevin? Yeah. Legally required? It is. The public hearing is now open.
Thank you very much. So a couple of months ago, probably actually 3 months ago, we started meeting with some individuals who represented Post Holdings. And as you're aware of, Post Holdings has been in a business in Brentwood for a long time. And actually they have several facilities that they lease or own in order to accommodate all their employees. So a few months ago, they came to the city with a project, kind of wanted to know what our thoughts were about it. This would be to purchase the Hampton Envelope building. There right at the corner of Hanley Industrial Court and Hanley Road. It's about 3.5 acres. When Hampton Envelope left, it's been vacant for quite a while. It's kind of been one of the eyesores of our community. So we talked about their plans, and so it seemed to work best, even though what they wanted to do would have been permissible in the light industrial district. There actually was more benefits, really tried to zone it to planned development, just in terms of some of the setback requirements and so forth. But probably more importantly, the rezoning matched what our comprehensive plan said. And if you recall, we just recently adopted our comprehensive plan back in April. And that was one of the suggestions for the Hanley Industrial Court sub-area, was to start looking at the areas that were light industrial and would it be possible to rezone those to planned development. So anyway, that's what the rezoning is for. If you remember, by code, rezoning to planned development also requires site plan. So tonight, the ordinance before you is to rezone the property and also to approve the site plan that was part of your packets. We were asking for first and second reading on this because it's an area that, again's been vacant and eyesore. We didn't have anyone that's come to any of the meetings with any comments or concerns, and also it's just surrounded by commercial property. So that, again, is the ordinance. I do want to point out, when we get to the ordinance, there has to be one revision to the ordinance, and that was just on Section 3. I made the mistake and had that the date of the site plans were August 3rd. And so when we get to that point, we'll look at changing that to be that the site plan that goes with this project should be the plans dated August 15th instead of August 3rd, and that's in Section 3. Other than that, the whole team is here, so either they can be able to present anything now or answer questions during the reading. Do you have any questions for me now during the public hearing?
Actually, I'd like to hold off on questions till
Okay.
after. Yep.
Very good, thanks.
All right, so the purpose of the public hearing is for the public to come forward and express to the Board of Aldermen any questions, concerns, comments that they have regarding the development proposal that's before the board this evening. The ordinance itself will be discussed later on, and that'll be a good time for the board to take up any issues that they may have. So any member of the public that would care to come forward and be heard by the Board of Aldermen on the proposal to rezone the site at 200 Hanley Industrial Court. Anyone? Anyone? Going once, going twice. The public hearing is now closed. Item number 5 on tonight's agenda is citizen comments. If any member of the public would like to come forward and address the board on any subject, feel free to do so. If you would state your name, you'll have at least 3 minutes to share any concern you might have. Anyone? Anyone? Going once? I'm not even going to do it 3 times. All right. Item number 6 on tonight's agenda is reports of the mayor and the aldermen. I don't have anything to report this evening in the interest of moving along to our presentation. I guess we can just go down the list here. Alderman Dimmitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ways and Means this Thursday is the citizen input for the 2019 budget. I would invite anybody again in the public that cares to show up and give us their view or their opinions as to how we should be spending the money, how you would like to see us budgeted in 2019 to show up Thursday at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer?
No report, Your Honor.
Alderman Leahy?
We have our Ward 3 meeting on Tuesday night, August the 26th at 7 p.m. here in this room. I'm sorry, September the 26th. Thank you. August was such a good month. August is September the 26th, and we'll be here at 7 o'clock. All are invited.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Our Public Works meeting for September will be right here Wednesday, the 12th at 4:30.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes, thank you. Our Ward 4 meeting will be on Tuesday, September 26th.
Something's in the water.
It's contagious. At the Brentwood Forest Clubhouse, and anyone is welcome.
Alderman Plufka, no report. Alderwoman Sims?
I'm happy to report that the Ward 2 Alderman meeting will be held on Wednesday this week at 6 p.m. right in this room. So,
Yes.
September.
Huh?
Wednesday.
Is it
Wednesday,
seven?
September
I
5th.
think it's 7.
Is it
It's
7?
Yes, we have it posted as 7.
Okay, I'll just change my
September the
calendar.
5th is tomorrow, right?
Yes,
so
it's
tomorrow.
at 7 in the council chambers right here.
Yeah.
We all
Signs
clear
have
it's
been
tomorrow?
put out everywhere.
Definitely tomorrow.
Okay, very
Definitely
good.
tomorrow.
Alderman Weggie?
Ditto.
Ditto. All right, very good. We have item number 7 on the agenda is the consent agenda. And on tonight's consent agenda, we have minutes approval from previous meetings. We have reports of standing committees. We have a special use application for Brentwood Days for craft beer sellers. And we have a special use permit for Brentwood Days for the Brentwood Public Library. Does any alderman have any questions or want to bring anything off of the consent agenda this evening?
Can I rephrase something? The special permit for the library is for a function on Friday nights,
Okay,
not for Brentwood Days.
okay.
Am I correct?
It says, yes, Brentwood Public Library, right. It is for a reading program.
An adult meeting
An adult.
called Just
it's
for Fun.
Just for Fun. It's a new event series for adults to be held the third Friday of every month at 6:30 in the library. You pick any book that fits the theme, and you join them monthly for an informal mixer. Different types of books: sci-fi September, horror October, non-fic November, and the rest.
All right, so we're all clear that in the detailed portion of the agenda, it calls for the books and beer program at the library. Alderman Leahy.
Correction, if I may, Your Honor. The 7A is standing committee reports. We have no minutes to be approved at this time.
There is no minutes in the consent for this
Okay.
meeting.
So we'll remove minutes from the minute approval from the consent agenda.
It wasn't there.
Got it. All right, at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as submitted. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please. Actually, you know what? We don't need a roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Very good. Under new business, item number 8 this evening, we have bill number 6217. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading of bill number 6217 by title only, please?
Sir, as soon as I get it. Bill number 6217, first reading. An ordinance to rezone certain property number 200 Handy Industrial Court from LI Light Industrial District to PD Planned Development Overlay District and approving a site plan in association therewith. Mr. Mayor, if I may, before proceeding further, as noted by Ms. Korkenmeier on her comments, as introduced, Bill 6217, Section 3, the second last line of the first paragraph, the date August 3 should be stricken, and the date August 15 inserted instead. Motion to amend would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we amend the bill from August 3rd to August 15th. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to amendment by acclamation? Seeing none, can we do that? You're giving me the look. All right, all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The bill will be so amended.
Thank you.
All right. First reading by title only of the amended bill.
It's been first read and
Oh.
amended.
Oh, okay, great. I'm sorry,
The
you already
title's
read
not
it.
changed.
I apologize. My fault. All right, so at this point, do the aldermen have any questions? Lisa's kind of given a brief explanation. I guess at this point, I would ask that if the aldermen have specific questions, we take them up. If not, Alderman Leahy?
I'm curious, the current building has the envelope name in the building itself. Is this because we're going to plant, the PD district, are we going to go to a monument sign or something on this property? And is there a difference between the light industrial and PD signage?
Okay, so, no to the last question.
Okay.
And obviously for this project, they do have to go through corporate for everything. And so to this point, they have not submitted their signage package, which typically if it's ready to go, it becomes part of this package. So actually the one condition that was in the site plan approval for the ordinance was that this wasn't to be construed in any way, that there would be signage that would be approved as part of this package. So there is none in here, and they would have to come back for that.
And we've done that with several other
Yes, we
big
have.
projects.
It
Yeah.
just clarifying, because I didn't read it in there.
Alderman Lockmill.
Lisa, are they, the other locations, are they consolidating to this new location and vacating the other locations? What's?
Yeah, and that again might, I might refer just to the representative, Pauline. She's here tonight if you have any questions about plans or so. I mean, that's my understanding.
Oh, that's what they're doing? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderwoman Sims.
I had an observation, looking closer at this agenda, it appears as though that the notice for the public hearing was for 7 o'clock.
Beg your pardon?
The notice for the public hearing was for 7, not 6. Is that gonna gum up anything?
Yeah, probably.
I don't wanna pop anyone's balloon. but-
Well, so let me throw this out there, just without, I'm sure our city attorney will give me the look if I get out of line. But let me suggest that we will still be here at 7 o'clock. Why don't we make a motion to take up a public hearing at 7 o'clock on the agenda, as per the notice?
Yes, sir, that'd be fine.
Sounds good to me.
We'll resume the public hearing at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, so.
And defer further action on the bill till.
Yeah, we definitely need to defer further action on the bill. So at this point, unless there's any objection from the board, I'm just going to kind of direct this, if that's all right. So Lisa, I'd ask you to stand down. We're going to go ahead and we're going to postpone this agenda item until as soon as reasonable after 7 o'clock, where we will enter back into the public hearing. And we'll take up bill number 6218 at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Any objection from the board to doing that course of action? All right, we'll do it that way. So item number 8B is bill number 6218. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6218, first reading. An ordinance authorizing engagement of expert resources to assist the city of Brentwood with underwriter engagement relating to potential municipal securities transactions for the Manchester Renewal Project Phase 2 bond issue.
Okay, and I think we have a synopsis on this.
Yes, Your Honor, to approve a contract agreement with Stiefel Nicholas and Company. This is Bill number 6218. That's the underwriter's role in managing municipal securities financing for the Manchester Renewal Project Phase 2. An ordinance authorizes an engagement agreement for the underwriter services for the potential municipal securities transactions for the Manchester Renewal Project on the Phase 2. The mayor and the board believe it's reasonable and prudent to make every reasonable effort to try and correct the circumstance to restore and revitalize the important segment of the city and return to the affected properties to the greatest extent possible to a more productive role within our city. The funding source of the project is the 2018 series of certificates participation, otherwise known as the COPs. Our city is aware of the municipal rule of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the requirement that firms declare to the proposed municipal issuer and any obligated person that it has done so within the regulatory framework of MSRB Rule G23. The request is for the first and second reading this evening, Bill 6218.
All right, if any member of the board has any questions, if you direct them to Bola, I guess, for starters, and then we can kind of go from there. Alderman Leahy.
I'm a little confused, so forgive me for being stupid. The 2018 COPs is for funding Phase 1 of this project. But this says it's funding Phase 2. I thought Phase 2 is what we're going to potentially discuss about finding a
Right.
source.
Right, we will be discussing it later on in the agenda. However, before the city can engage Stiefel Nicholas to provide us with numbers, we refer to the municipal rule of the Securities and Exchange Commission, where there has to be a formal action to enter into agreement for them to provide that service with the city. So part of the presentation tonight, we have been talking to them, but nothing has been really provided in writing. So to keep them clean and us clean, the board needs to take action so that they can formally provide us that information.
So I think what Alderman Leahy was asking is, are we engaging them to advise us with respect to 2018 COPs?
No, we've
Okay.
already done that.
Exactly. So what Alderman Kramer just read, he read correctly, but it's citing the wrong funding source.
The
So,
bill,
I
the
think
bill
that may
does
be a-
not say that.
What does the bill say? 20
Just engage them for Phase 2.
Got it, okay.
The funding
So it's a-
source of
it's a
this
typo in
project is the 2018 series certificate
Oh,
of
under
participation.
budget source, so.
It says,
Not in
well,
the bill.
It's not in the bill.
okay,
It's
So we
in
can,
board
we can look
docs.
upon that as a typo in the.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's the confusion.
All right, other questions?
Why are we doing it first and second tonight on this?
Well, because they've already started providing the city the information, so we want to keep them clean.
And there are underwriters on Phase 1 already, correct?
Well, exactly. They have a history of a long-term relationship with the city that goes back to what year? I don't know. 1998. So that's Jim Leahy.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Alderman Dimmitt.
so since this is not dealing with the COP proceeds, how would they be paid? Are they being paid out of the COP?
No, they will not be paid until the city issues debt.
Okay,
So, if the city issues debt.
right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. At this point, I guess our ordinance calls for us to do readings at separate meetings unless we act to have two readings within the same meeting. So at this point, I would ask for a motion to have a second reading of bill number 6218.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we have a second reading of bill 6218 at tonight's meeting. Is there any discussion? So this, at this point, if you don't think we need to do two meetings at this reading, you should say so. All right. All in favor of the motion to proceed to second reading of bill 6218, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, very good. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the second reading of bill 6218 by title only, please?
Bill number 6218, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance authorizing engagement of expert resources to assist the city of Brentwood with underwriter engagement relating to potential municipal securities transactions for the Manchester Renewal Project Phase 2 bond issue.
All right, thank you. I'd entertain a motion to perfect.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we perfect bill number 6218. Is there any discussion of the bill? Okay, I'm hearing crickets, so we're going to go straight to a vote. Could we have a roll call, please?
Alderman Demmett,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
And I will note Alderman Pluck as absent.
I'm betting he shows up about time we do the second public hearing.
I think it's so too.
If I was a betting man, I'd say you see him stumble in about 5 to 7.
With a look of surprise on his face.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so item number 9 on tonight's agenda, we have a presentation on the Manchester renewal update. And I believe that Craig Schluter is here from Navigate, and he's going to be giving us a presentation. So, Mr. Schluter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Craig Schluter with Navigate Building Solutions, and I will be providing a Manchester renewal update. This is an exciting night because we've achieved a lot to get to this point. So along with all the achievements we've gotten to get through Phase 1 projects, we're also going to be talking about next steps on Phase 2. So tonight's agenda is an update on the objective of Manchester renewal. We're going to talk about key milestones that have been met to date, along with key accomplishments. We're going to talk about the Phase 1 scope of work, which are the projects that are funded by the April certificates of participation, along with the Phase 2 projects that we'll talk about funding sources later. And then following my presentation, Steve from PJV will be talking about the economic development sales tax and some funding sources from there. And then we'll conclude with next steps. So why are we doing this? We've talked about this over and over again, and the main objective of this is to talk about or to address the ongoing flooding issues. This area has flooded 26 times since 1957. That has led to public and safety issues. That has deemed this area as a blighted area. So the city went down the path of studying how to address the flooding issues. With the alternative D plan that CH2M put together, we determined that we could remove Manchester Road from the 100-year floodplain. We could reduce 60 acres down to 27 acres out of the floodplain. And remember, those 27 acres that we're down to in the floodplain ultimately are areas that are designed to flood. So those are retention ponds and areas along Deer Creek. A lot of the properties that we're moving out of the floodplain are along Manchester Road. Most of the areas that we're leaving in the floodplain are along Deer Creek, so not as desirable properties. And ideally, it's creating a unique urban creek area if the city were to continue developing this. So a lot of key milestones have been met to date in a short period of time. And these are just a few high-level dates. There are a lot more, but the staff, the consultants in this group have really helped this project gain a lot of traction and momentum, and all these are critical steps of where we are tonight. It started back in December when TWM's contract was approved by you all to start the Manchester Road improvement design. That was really important because it was MoDOT. We had to keep up with MoDOT's design dates, and if Brentwood did not hire TWM, we would not have been able to keep up with those design dates, which would have prevented a potential partnership with MoDOT. The city then allowed the previous certificates of participation that we'll call COPs refunding in December. That was a critical first step to the then later COPs to be brought forth and closed on in April. Those certificates of participation in April allowed ultimately Phase 1 projects to really get a jump start. And the Phase 1 projects, again, are the Deer Creek Flood Mitigation Phase 1 and the Manchester Road improvements. Without that, we wouldn't be where we are today, so that was a critical step. In June, the Redevelopment Corporation and that ordinance passed by you all. The moratorium ordinance passed in July. Jacobs was ultimately approved by the board also in July, which allowed the design for the Deer Creek flood mitigation to commence. That was a direct benefit from those COPs closing in April. Next, in August, you will all allow the city staff to begin negotiating on some property acquisitions. Again, that was due to those COPs closing back in April. And then lastly, the Moratorium Planning Advisory Committee was appointed a couple weeks ago, which ultimately allows this area to be reviewed for zoning requirements to ensure the master plan that Brentwood wants can ultimately be achieved. So there have been a lot of project accomplishments to date. We're just highlighting a few here. You all have heard about these and seen these because I've presented on these in previous months. And while it's great that we've been able to reduce costs and in the future receive these funds, what really excites me about this slide is it shows that beyond the city of Brentwood, how many agencies and districts and groups really support your vision for Manchester Renewal. These are very tough competitions for these grants. The SCP grant, for example, hundreds of cities and agencies and districts go for that. And the fact that Brentwood scored so highly shows how well this is viewed amongst the overall region. But the staff and all of us are not leaving any stone unturned. We are meeting with other agencies and districts. We take the public funds very seriously, so we're constantly trying to gain as much benefit for the city of Brentwood as possible. And that's why, even beyond what we've achieved so far, we're continuing to look at future grants and future partnerships in subsequent months. So I've been talking about Phase 1 and Phase 2 projects. So Phase 1, again, is the COP projects that were closed on in April. So once you all approved the COPs, $39 million was deposited in the construction fund, and that allowed the Deer Creek Flood Mitigation Phase 1 and the Manchester Road improvements to really commence and for those critical next steps to take place. Phase 2 is the remaining projects. We've always talked about all these projects as part of Manchester Renewal. We've always said that the COPs only takes care of part of the funds that are needed for the overall program. So Phase 2 is the Phase 2 of Deer Creek flood mitigation and also of the Deer Creek Greenway connector. And with the future funding discussions that will happen after my presentation, that will allow those projects to commence, be designed, and be constructed, again, what the overall vision of the city of Brentwood is. I will mention that, with Phase 1, we've talked a lot about them through various Board of Alderman meetings when I present, but all these funds that have been allocated for this project, the staff, the consultants, all of us take very seriously. We're constantly looking at protecting every single cent, and we do that through, negotiating these contracts with all the various groups, through competition, through making sure that we reference them against industry comps, and making sure that we bring forth that contract that is the best value for the city of Brentwood. So we take that very seriously, and we'll take that very seriously on Phase 2. So Phase 1, just a quick recap. These are the same slides that you guys have heard before. This is the Deer Creek flood mitigation. This addresses approximately 70% of the flooding issues. Just like we've talked about before, it includes storage areas for the water to go, stream bank stabilization, widening, benching of that stream, just allowing that confluence of the Deer Creek to hold more water so we can control where that water goes versus in areas that are currently, where properties are. This Phase 1 goes from Brentwood up to the Breckenridge Industrial Court Bridge. So that's where it stops. That's the delineator between Phase 1 and Phase 2. Manchester Road improvements. So as you recall, there's two different parts of this project. There's a part that MoDOT's doing, that they're funding, and then there's the part that Brentwood is going to enhance to make that nice corridor that Brentwood is seeking. So MoDOT is going to be doing the mill and overlay on the pavement, improving drainage, replacing the Manchester Road Bridge near Hanley, some sidewalk and ADA improvements, and some traffic signal upgrades. Brentwood has had the opportunity, due to getting TWM on board, like I mentioned earlier, at that critical date in December, to partner up with MoDOT and get their enhancements done at a fraction of the cost because of the ability to work with MoDOT and do these projects at the same time. That has allowed us to do the pedestrian tunnel underneath Manchester Road, decorative street signage, lighting, sidewalks. A new update is that with that STP grant, the city is able to do a 10-foot wide shared use path on the south side, which will improve pedestrian use and cycling for a better, safer way to navigate down Manchester Road. So the Phase 1 schedule, this is the exact same schedule I presented to you all a couple weeks ago. We're on schedule, just real high level. The flood mitigation Phase 1, like I presented recently, Jacob's designing it right now. It's an 18-month design period. The goal is to have the design and the permitting done February of 2020. The city is currently undergoing property acquisitions for that project, And then both of those will allow construction to start, the demolition package in May of next year, and the construction of the overall improvements starting spring of 2020. The Manchester Road improvements, again, as I've recently presented, currently under design. MoDOT will start their property acquisitions this fall. The drawing phase will continue during that process, but will be completed spring of 2020. That's a 2-year, 2-month construction phase, 26 months, which allows it to get wrapped up December of 2022. So the phase 2 projects, these are the last projects to get the overall Manchester renewal complete, are the Deer Creek Flood Mitigation Phase 2 and the Deer Creek Greenway Connector. So the Phase 2 flood mitigation project, as I reported on earlier, starts at that Breckenridge Industrial Court Bridge. It then goes east. Similarly, but on a smaller scale, there will be some storage areas, and there's going to be a lot of stream bank work that allows that area to address the remaining 30% of the flood issues. So between doing both of these, we can get to the overall objective presented by that original final analysis that CH2M presented to you all a while ago. And then lastly is the Deer Creek Greenway Connector. So this is an alignment that takes us from the north of Manchester, underneath the tunnel, goes down along Mary Avenue, connects to Brentwood, goes through the wetland area to the south of the bi-state, and then connects over to the completed Gravers Greenway Deer Creek alignment on the south side adjacent to Marshall Road. So overall, I hope none of this is any new information. I believe we've presented on this multiple times. What's important to note is the last time the mayor presented back in January, the work session, we were at an overall program of $74.5 million, and that's still where we're at today. So we've been able, through many months and a lot of surprises and updates, and you just learn more as progress go on, to maintain that overall program budget. We still ultimately need to get those phase 2 funds to complete the overall program. So that completes the project update. Following me are going to be PGAV, and I think Bola's going to take us off.
I'm gonna tee this up.
Sure.
While we're doing that, does any member of the, hey, welcome.
I apologize.
You beat my estimate by 15 minutes. If there's any member of the board that has questions for Craig while we're at it, Alderman Lockmiller, you've got your hand up.
Craig, on that second phase of the GRG, originally we were looking at some type of whipsaw, ADA acceptable way to get across the tracks.
Correct.
Now it sounds like we're gonna run along Brentwood. Is that a cost-saving measure? Does that translate into cost savings since we're not having to do that any longer?
I wouldn't say it's a cost-saving measure. We had heard about potential concerns about the use of that bridge and maybe not being desirable for pedestrians. So ultimately, this was an alternative path to achieve the alignment that we're looking for. Assuming the funds assuming this phase 2 funds do get allocated, it's up to the design team to present multiple alignments, even beyond the 2 that you have seen, for ultimately a group to agree and determine what alignment they want.
How that worked out, Steve, was in order to go that direction and go over to Brentwood Boulevard, you'd have to acquire more property. So the money you save not building a cement bridge, you spend acquiring more property. Roughly. I mean, it's not an exact thing, but that's roughly how it is. And I think pretty much any alignment follows that same deal.
Correct.
And then on the MoDOT portion, I guess it'll be starting around 2020 in our area.
Correct.
But it stretches all the way down to Limburg. Well, they have already been working down on that end towards us? Or how does the whole project go for the Manchester Road?
I don't know the overall MoDOT scheduled project, but I know in the city of Brentwood, their dates that I presented ultimately concludes December of 2022 is when they'll be done. But to your point, they're working from Maplewood through to Pear. I don't know all the details of the scheduling beyond the city of Brentwood. I can find out though for you.
Thank you.
Alderman Waggy.
So when we first started this, the $70 million number we were kind of throwing around was very notional, right? So what confidence level do we have that 74 million is the total nut that we'd have to spend on this?
I mean, with what we know now, we're confident with that number.
Okay, so there is analysis to substantiate that. I mean, that is,
Correct. I mean, we've done appraisals and properties, we've got conceptual engineer estimates for all the different construction projects. So we have data that gets to that number. It's not a pie in the sky number, but yeah, with everything we know now, we're confident with that number.
okay, then, I'm glad, thanks for asking about the bridge, but is one of those options still like a level crossing of the railroad tracks? Because I still am having a hard time understanding why these very expensive options are required for a train track that's seldom used, and it just doesn't make sense.
I would invite Alderman Legge to look at the Federal Railroad Act and, no, seriously, it's.
I am an engineer.
Yeah, well, it's a mess. The
I
truth,
know.
yeah. Go ahead, Craig, I don't know how you'd answer that, but.
So, yeah, one of the alignments is to cross the railroad tracks like we just showed. So currently we're aware of two, one that goes over and one that goes across street level. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if we fund these, we'll study other options to present back to you all to come up with it. With the UP Railroad, unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience working with them, and they stick with their rules, and they really don't want to change their rules. I've personally talked to the representative for this portion of track, just telling him about the limited use of that track, because that track only goes to various parcels, and he didn't really seem to be accommodating. Even that was limited use. He said that in some sort of event, they may need to store trains there, even though he couldn't tell me when that happened. So they don't accommodate you all. So we're trying to ultimately come up with a design that benefits Brentwood and that works along the UP guidelines.
But if you go out to Brentwood Boulevard, you're going across at street level.
Correct. And they're okay with that.
Because there's already a street level crossing.
Yes.
Because there's already a crossing.
I mean,
Correct.
it's like 75 yards away.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Brandon, honestly, they're backed up by a huge bank of federal law. And
Yes.
you just can't force them to do anything they don't want to do. It's pretty much that simple. Now, I share your frustration, believe me. For a spur line that gets used like once a month, right?
Right.
I think the city was actually very lucky that back in the 1950s, 1960s, we were able to reach an agreement that allows us parking space along Russell. And since then, I think we've been sharing with the Board of Aldermen that they wanted us to put up a fence along that berm that surrounds Brentwood Park. And we've been having a serious dialogue with them and making sure that they understand that some of the requirements that they are requesting that the city impose would really diminish the value of our park system. So to what Craig is saying, they are extremely difficult to deal with. And history from other consultants on our team back that up. So I doubt that no matter what we do, we're going to get them to, be a little more we're able to do that.
Interestingly, the tunneling under is an option, but it comes with a whole host of what you might.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think the important point to take away is that's by no means a final design.
Correct.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
All right, thank you. In our very first sketches, we looked at the marshland south of the bus depot. And that was going to be part of the retention. There would be a trail around it, and yet that isn't on any of the new sketches. Is that out of the picture for some reason?
No, that was on the GRG connector.
It's not first or second phase.
It should be.
It's
It is
second
second
phase.
phase.
It's second phase.
So phase
So
two.
the way that worked out is the I'll call it a marshland for lack of a better term, but we all know the 6-acre parcel that's just south of the bi-state. That area did not turn out to be necessary for holding water. In other words, if we looked at flooding that area, it didn't add to our capacity,
Okay.
right? So, but what it did turn out to be is useful for the sustainability of our project, and turning that into anything other than a natural area that it already is a bad idea. So we've continued, I think, to pursue the acquisition of that land, and bi-state continues to be willing to part with it as part of this project.
Okay.
So maybe what you're remembering is back when we started, one of the options that the city was looking at is maybe digging that area and using it. Exactly.
But that,
So-
that,
so if we don't need it,
that went
then-
off the table when
We
it became
abandoned
clear that
that.
it didn't add to the.
Didn't have to
Very
be.
quickly, because Deer Creek Watershed Alliance, they're more supportive of water quality, and they felt, and engineers and other, they had a stakeholders group, and they felt that we needed to try to preserve it and make sure that we have water quality enhancements rather than digging and creating a detention pond there. So as the mayor said, we abandoned that option.
So if
And more importantly, the engineering showed that having a retention area there wasn't gonna help the flooding.
Exactly.
so natural is good, it
No,
stays.
no point in fighting that battle if it don't do you no good.
Okay, and then my other question is just to confirm that plans are still not certain. We can still work to lessen that trail around Manchester Road and find alternative routes
Correct.
for a biking
Really,
trail that's not next to the highway.
you're talking about the GOG connector trail that goes
Yes, the
south?
10-foot long,
No, she's talking about the 10-foot shared use
Oh,
path.
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah.
And go ahead, I'm sorry, what's your question?
Since there would be no pedestrian access to the buildings there, it seems as though it would be rather lost. I would not bike there, friends would not bike there. I would certainly not push a buggy with children next to that. I can't see that it would get any more walking groups there than the one in Rock Hill. So if we can work to mitigate that and figure out some other way, that would be a great way to keep refining the plan.
Okay. So the shared use path, we can look at that with you. Ultimately, there was a lot of feedback given from the city and also from MoDOT and various groups that there was a strong request and demand to continue that shared use path, even beyond Brentwood. So we can look at the functionality with the various businesses with you, but safety is an important component of the design with that, and they are, including, green areas to separate vehicles on the road from the shared use path. So there are certain things to go with the safety, but in regards to the actual design with the buildings, we can definitely look at with you.
Not gonna work.
I think Lisa can speak a little
Mhm.
to that because we've been talking about that at the moratorium meeting last week.
I'll keep it brief because obviously it's just, we had our first meeting for the Manchester Planning Advisory Committee last week. So it did show on the bubble concept, just the development plan for the Manchester Road area. It had that, both the trail around the Deer Creek and then also the 10-foot wide multi-use path south of Manchester. So I know that point was raised. When we reconvene that planning group again, October 8th is our next meeting, we will be discussing that further. So again, it's still kind of under discussion. But
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Craig. And now Bola is going to tee up the next presentation,
So
which
I'm,
is,
yes.
go ahead.
Exactly, thank you. So I just wanted to do a really quick recap of everything that Craig talked about. We're making progress, positive. We're spending taxpayers wisely. I hope you all agree that we're doing that positive. We're leveraging multiple partnerships, and Craig went through the list, and there are others that we are yet to meet with that we have upcoming meetings scheduled with. I'm getting calls from developers who are also interested in property acquisition in the project area. That is positive. Some of what we're going to be talking to the board about tonight is consideration of the economic development sales tax. So we knew that in order to fully fund the project, that would be the most reasonable funding source for the city to take a look at. And what this will do for us, given what you are going to hear tonight, there are many options. Ability to retire the debt sooner, ability to retire it earlier, which would be positive. There will be legislative action that will be taken by the board in January. You all have taken a lot so far. And the prudent way, my opinion, to ensure the entire project is completed is as follows. We have city staff in place. We have a great project consulting team. We're working very well together. And we're doing phase 1, ready to proceed, my opinion, and the teams with phase 2. We have contracts with consultants, and we've built in cost savings through very vigorous and hard negotiations so far. And some of the questions that, I'm not sure how to do this. slides that Craig showed you shows the total cost, $74,519,000. In April, the board approved 39.225 of the total cost. The remaining funds that are needed is the 35,294,000. Once again, the economic development funding source, economic development sales tax is the funding source that the city is pursuing. And in meeting with the different aldermen, these are some of the questions that I was asked, and I thought that I would share that with you. What gives the city authorization to impose the economic development sales tax is the revised state Missouri Chapter 67. How do we know the amount of sales tax that may be imposed? That same chapter also says shall not be more than 1/2%. And how do we know it must be placed before the voters? There's language in Chapter 67 that talks about the tax shall not become effective unless the governing body of the city or county submits this to the voter. And what percentage, if any, of this economic development sales tax does the city get to keep? 100% of that. So last fall, the city hired, the Board of Aldermen approved an agreement to hire PGAV to do a sales tax analysis. So I have asked Andy Struckhoff to come and provide a high-level summary of that report. He's going to talk about the city's total taxable sales, comparative sales tax with neighboring cities or places where people go to shop, and what are strengths that Brentwood has, its location, its competitive position, the volume of retailers that we have, the unique stores, and these are things that give Brentwood a gravitational pull. Andy.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Andy Struckhoff of PGAV Planners.
Escape.
Sorry about that. As Will mentioned several months ago, we were retained by the city of Brentwood to produce an analysis of taxable sales activity in the city of Brentwood, to review Brentwood sales tax rates, how it compares to other jurisdictions, and basically to give the city an idea of where Brentwood fits in the competitive retailing landscape in St. Louis County. In that report was a chart that showed basically sales tax trends in the city of Brentwood since the year 2010. And you can see in this chart here, the trajectory is pretty positive till about 2015, 2016, 2017 levels off a little bit. In 2017, overall sales tax collections were down a little bit more than 1%. In 2016, there was still an increase. Let's see. I'd also thought it'd be helpful for tonight's discussion to take a look at some of the major shopping centers in our area and how the collection of retail centers are performing. So we looked at Brentwood Square, the Promenade, Brentwood Point, Maplewood Commons, which are all within the Hanley Road Corridor TDD, and sales over the past 5 years. And the sales tax rate across all these shopping centers is 10.113%, which is the highest in St. Louis County. And you see the sales tax figures here, starting in 2012 at $580 million, in 2017, $592 million. A change of roughly a little bit more than around 1.5%. over the past 5 years, sales here have trended upward, but only a little amount, 0.4%, effectively flat, really. So, in other words, the taxable sales aren't growing a significant amount. Compared to inflation, they're lower than inflation. Inflation in the past few years has averaged between 1.9 and 2%. So they're just about what they are. Now, if the city put the issue before the voters to add a half-cent economic development sales tax, and if the voters in the city of Brentwood approved such a sales tax, then the sales tax rate in these shopping centers, with the exception of Maplewood Commons, would increase to 10.613%. So what impact might that have on a consumer shopping in these shopping districts? Let's take Home Depot for an example. The average receipt at Home Depot is $63. That's per their last annual report. So an average sales tax on that here in Brentwood is $6.37. The sales tax is increased to 10.613%. The sales tax becomes $6.68, a difference of 31 cents, which is not a huge increase. It's 0.5%. Now, one thing we should keep in mind when we're talking about Home Depot purchases of lumber, kitchen cabinets, and things that are fixed to the real estate, or sales are taxed at where the site they are installed, rather than the point of sale. Okay. A couple more examples. Say you spend $1,000 on computer equipment at Micro Center or Best Buy. The Micro Center is a good example, since it's the only one in the region. And if you're a personal computing enthusiast and you like to build your own machine, this is the place where you like to go. So say you spend $1,000 there on computer equipment. The difference between a 10.1% sales tax rate and 10.6% sales tax rate is $5. And if you're buying your groceries at Whole Foods, the sales tax rate on food is different than the total sales tax rate, because the total state sales tax rate doesn't apply to your food purchases, and a portion of the county sales tax rate also doesn't apply to food purchases. So the difference there would be about 50 cents, $6.73 versus $7.23 on a $100 Whole Foods bill. So will this have any impact on somebody's decision-making process when they're thinking about where to shop? Our research indicates that people don't really pay that much attention to the sales tax rate when they're shopping. And if the public knows that there's going to be an increase in sales taxes, research indicates that there may be like a stocking up effect, where people go out and they hit the shops before the sales tax increases. So they may see a month or two of increased sales activity, followed by a slump of a month or two, but then after time passes and people get accustomed to the new sales tax rate, then sales pick back up. Is really when people are shopping, their primary concerns are, do they have what I want? Is it convenient for me to get to there and shop? Is the price competitive? People shop more on price than they do on sales tax rate. And is it a good shopping experience? Do I have a good service? And can I get what I want quickly and easily? I can point to at least one example in the St. Louis region where we have two directly comparable retail centers. I would say the two outlet malls in Chesterfield Valley. One did much better in sales than the other, and the one that did better had a half-cent higher sales tax rate. And the rate at which it exceeded sales of the other outlet center was, as I recall, roughly a factor of 3. And I think the determining factors there were location, tenants. One had superior tenants than the other, although they had some tenants in common. One had also some better anchors. And the layout and design of the facility was better. It was a better shopping experience for consumers. So that, in a nutshell, is my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for Andy? Alderman Demmett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy, what was it that you said, the tax rate's dependent upon what is installed, under what circumstances does that come into
So if
play?
someone's buying lumber or kitchen cabinets, for example, at Home Depot to be installed in their home, then those purchases are sales taxed at the home's address rather than the point of sale, because they'd be affixed to the real estate.
Okay,
Right.
not an appliance, though.
Correct.
All right. And on your key factors in consumer decision-making, what's the source for that?
That is my own personal experience in 10 years of evaluating taxable sales performance of retail shopping centers and communities like this.
Not your personal experience, but experience for your clients and?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Alderman Lockmiller.
Andy, I guess if we're looking to raise a sales tax here, it could be detrimental if we had competition across the street with a lower sales tax. I guess what you're saying here is due to the uniqueness of our shopping here and our location, sales tax is not a contributing factor to why people come here. It's those other things, location and uniqueness.
Mhm. I'd agree with that. The city of Brentwood accounts for 4% of all retail sales activity in the St. Louis County, which is pretty outstanding considering the size of the community. They're really the only closest competition for Brentwood is the Chesterfield Valley. And people aren't going to, pass Brentwood to go to the Chesterfield Valley. Or if they live a little ways west of here, they're not going to go to the valley instead of coming here. So I think you have a distinct competitive advantage in that respect.
Alderman Leahy.
If I
Excuse me.
may, Andy, my question's a little confusing, so see if I can get it right. You're suggesting that we do the economic development sales tax within the city of Brentwood. Does that include internet sales that would come out of Brentwood also? Would that tax apply to that? Or is that just straight, internet sales being straight sales tax for the state of Missouri?
So you're asking if someone has an internet online business in the city of Brentwood, would they pay that economic development sales
Yes.
tax? I feel like that's a legal question. I'm not sure if I,
We do not collect sales tax on internet transactions unless the seller has a place of business in the state of Missouri. If they do, then our sales tax rate applies cumulative of all local sales taxes.
All right. So the numbers we're using at this point is just brick and mortar sales here in the city
Correct.
of Brentwood. If the city would be so inclined to go back and educate the voters to potentially look to go back to the Department of Revenue to pick up internet sales tax money, would that bring more money in for us?
No.
No, it
We
would not.
don't, we are not, the city does not have authority to impose sales tax on internet sales.
True.
The city previously submitted to the voters a use tax, which is equivalent to the rate of local sales tax. That is not an internet sales tax. Okay?
All right.
It is a use tax for out-of-state purchases, which would be subject to sales tax if made in the state, and is only required to be paid if you file a use tax return.
Okay.
All right? We do not have, under the current law of Missouri, the ability to require remote sellers to collect sales tax on transactions in Missouri.
Okay, so I can't look for additional funding that method?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Andy? All right, thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, at this time, it's 7:04, and I think we had a motion to, at 7 o'clock, reconvene the public hearing on bill number 6218.
17.
17, my apologies. So at this point in time, I am going to gavel in the public hearing on bill number 6217. And I'll just remind everybody, this bill is the amendment of the zoning map for Impact Real Properties LLC. It's an ordinance authorizing the amendment of the zoning map to rezone LI Light Industrial District to PD Planned Development District for a property located at 200 Hanley Industrial Court, better known to some of us as the Hampton Envelope Building. So at this point, I'm going to gavel in the public hearing. If any member of the public would care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen on the proposed rezoning from light industrial to planned development, please come forward and make your comments. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Ed Breimer. I own a business and property at 132 Hanley Industrial Court, known as In Graphics Architectural Signage. And we've been in the city of Brentwood since 1984 and actively participate in a lot of community functions and boards and committees, and proud to be a business member of the community. I couldn't be more excited as a member of the Hanley Industrial Court Association, as well as an adjacent landowner. I couldn't be more happy to what I can see and hear in the proposal that this group wants to do. I think it's a great add to the community. I think it's going to bring people and revenue and business and a lot of activity to Brentwood that other proposals in the past maybe didn't do such a good job of. And I was on the commission with the mayor and Lisa on the 2020 plan, and this is right in line with what we're trying to do with the court. We're also considering rebranding the court to a new name, which this will be a vital partner to help us through that. And I just want to offer my undeniable support of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to come forward and address the Board of Aldermen on the proposed rezoning of 200 in Hanley Industrial Court? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And should we do the first reading again just to be safe, or are we okay proceeding to second? All right, so it had previously, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a motion to waive the rules, proceed to second reading would be in order.
We actually already had the motion and it carried to move to the second reading. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to make the second reading of Bill number 6217 by title only.
Bill number 6217, second reading, and consideration for adoption. An ordinance to rezone certain property number 200 Hanley Industrial Court from LI Light Industrial District to PD Planned Development Overlay District, and approving a site plan in association therewith.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I'll make the motion to perfect Bill 6217 as amended into ordinance form.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Leahy, seconded by Alderwoman Sims to perfect Bill number 6217 as amended into ordinance form. Any discussion from the board? Alderman Lockmiller.
I guess I'll just make a comment. After all the work that staff and citizens have done on the new comprehensive plan, this project just seems to plug right into that vision, and I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, it's really serendipitous that happened.
$16 word.
I get paid by the word, buddy. Any other discussion from the board? Alderman Kramer.
Your Honor, can we find out what the proposed timeline is for this project?
Lisa, do you know what the proposed timeline for this project is?
I have to defer to the petitioner.
Okay. Could you give us a brief overview of the timeline?
I will do that. Thank you. My name is Pauline Weegriff. I'm happy to be here this evening. We are hoping to have this project, I'd love to be able to be in this area by the end of 2019. That may be very aggressive, but we can try for that. I'll let our experts talk to that a little bit later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's have a roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Wagan.
Yes.
I count 8 yes votes and 0 no votes, so by unanimous decision of the board, the site plan is approved. Congratulations. And welcome to a permanent home in Brentwood. How shall we say that? All right, now we go back to our regularly scheduled program. Let's see. Where are we?
Working dinner.
10A?
Yeah, I'm a little, well, so we've already done the dinner part. How's this gonna work?
So next on the agenda is I want to recognize Jim Leahy and John Claus to talk about the funding source. What I'm trying to do is to pull up documentation that they provided. So earlier this evening, Craig indicated that the total project cost is $74,519,000. And we also talked about the economic development sales tax at a half-cent sales tax being how much the city could possibly assess to generate proceeds to fund that gap. So I've asked Jim to come talk to you about the analysis they have done that would generate up to a net of 41 million, and explain to you how they arrive at that number. And we have, because we're going to be talking about huge numbers, in the event that he needs to write these numbers up on this easel, we're providing this as well. Just anticipating all the mathematicians. So Jim, if you want to.
This got a lot more fun.
It's my understanding there would be no math.
Big moments.
If you draw a chart, this would be the greatest meeting we've ever had.
Chevy Chase's greatest line on Saturday Night Live.
Thank you very much, everybody. Jim Leahy with Stiefel. I want to introduce, Bola just did, but John Klaus, right here, who's worked with Stiefel for 15 years. And you've seen me over the years, but really, John Klaus is the guy doing most of the work. So, so I'm glad for John to be here this evening. And the main point is I wanted to make sure that we can answer any question you have about the numbers, okay? Whether it's the other certificates of participation or these. It is confusing. Bola shared with us some questions that some of you had, and I will just comment, generally speaking, all the numbers that you're talking about, I know they seem confusing, and sometimes they seem contradictory. Actually, all your numbers are correct, and we'll explain how they really are actually consistent. I'm looking at you, Alderman Demick, because I did see your email this afternoon, but I know others of you had questions as well. So let me just start out by saying that the background that you heard earlier this evening is that the total annual taxable sales within the city is $660 million there. And the proposed economic development sales tax rate of 0.5%. And what that would generate, and the key number is the 3.2 million. So we'd have revenues, annual revenues, think of it this way, of $3.2 million. If you were to use that revenue stream, the question becomes, we were asked, how could we net out an additional 41 million? Now, let me just explain quickly, because I know some of you, I've been in enough meetings on this subject to know that there's always been a concern about cost overruns and how do we know we have enough money to do the entire project. I understand that. So I don't want to confuse you anymore when Craig showed earlier, and you saw earlier, a total project cost for phase 1 and phase 2 of $74.5 million. And now, we already, from the series 2018, the earlier certificates issued this year, they were generated a little over 39 million. It was 39,225,000. So now you're seeing in these numbers an additional net net proceeds of 41 million. Well, we can do the math. 41 plus 39 equals 80. It's not 74 and a half. That's part of the confusion I think that we have here. We were asked to run numbers and show you what it looked like for $80 million, okay? Nobody's suggesting the project cost has gone up to $80 million. Please understand that. And if you decide to proceed with this funding vehicle, and we get into next year, and it's time to actually issue more certificates, please understand that the amount of certificates that would be issued would be what you need for your project. No, not a penny more, okay? So don't get hung up, please. Don't get too hung up on the $41 million. Oh my gosh, they're talking 80. We're gonna make sure that if additional certificates are issued, it's for the project amount that you need, okay? No, nothing extra. But for illustrative purposes, we've tried to, and I always use the example of your home, if you were financing your home, and many of us have done this. So you go and you find a home that you're interested in buying, and you settle on a price, and you're trying to determine out how you can, if you can afford it, and what your monthly payments would be. Quite simply, really in financing with municipalities and counties and school districts, it's the same way. Can we really afford it? So in this particular case, we have a revenue stream, I just said, of $3.2 million. PGAV's work showed us that. They gave us the background to how they came up with that number. So if we took $3.2 million and we wanted to use it all, and we wanted to pay it off quickly, we could do it in 17 years. That's the 17 and the $3.2 million. Would net $41 million. Let me walk over here and show you. So, $41 million net proceeds.
Thank you.
Along with the money we got in earlier this year. We did it for 17 years. We took that revenue stream. It would net $41 million. The bond issue would actually be larger than $41 million, like it was earlier this year. And that was Alderman, that part of your questioning, which was a good question, by the way. So if we did 17 years, used all of it, we would net out that amount. Well, what if I'll go through each of these, but what if we went on 30 years? We didn't want to use the entire $3.2 million for debt service. We want to have a cushion. We want to use it for other projects, other things that do. So we would only use $2.4 million. We finance it over a longer period of time. Still net out $41 million. But there would be, in this example, $800,000 that would not be used for debt service on these certificates. Okay. And then there's the combinations in between. If we went out 20 years, you'd use 2.9. If we went out 25 years, 2.6. And you can see, the longer you go out. Now, why didn't we go beyond 30 years? Well, it's because in the bond world, in the debt market, 30 years is about the length of time that bondholders want to buy bonds, whether or certificates. So we didn't go out beyond. Could you go out a little longer? Yes, you could. You got 32 years, or probably even 35 years. But we stuck with the traditional time frames. So I hope that clarifies a little bit of what's happened here. The 2008 certificates, again, generated $39 million. This example, that's all it is, examples, shows you how to get another 41, that would be 80 million, and we work with the numbers that PGAV helped us prepare. I should probably just stop there and let you, it's okay, let you ask any questions and certainly clarify some of your points or anybody else.
Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought that Andy had just got up a minute ago and said that in our experience, annual sales amounted to something slightly less than $600 million, and you've got it listed as 660. Am I right about that? Didn't you list 592 million as being the sales?
That was for
15 years, 20 years.
So this 660 represents a larger group of.
The 660 represents Brentwood, total Brentwood taxable.
the
Well, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that
192 million figure you're citing was for the Hanley Road Corridor TDD, which includes several shopping centers in Brentwood and also Maplewood Commons. They're talking about the citywide Brentwood taxable sales fee.
I thought the graph you showed us had to do with Brentwood. No? From 2010 to 2017?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I thought I saw, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I thought I saw at the end of it, you had indicated that the number reflected in that graph was something slightly less than $600 million in annual sales.
I don't recall putting that up.
Isn't it 590?
No.
No?
His graph was I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. His
Okay.
graph was 650. Is this what you're talking about, Dave?
I
Yeah,
think so.
It is, it
I
is.
know it was more than
It
600
is.
million in that
Okay.
that chart.
So thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry, Jim. The other question I've got for you is, you had suggested that we might not use all of the money generated by this economic development sales tax for this project itself.
Yes, sir.
In the way that we put together language to our voters in January and the way that it's voted on in April, aren't we required to describe for them what this sales tax is being used for? And if we didn't, and do we have that kind of latitude with this kind of a sales tax effort? Mr. City Attorney?
I think the language is substantially dictated by the statute. I'm gonna take a look at it right now. If you'll give me a second, I'll
Okay.
track that down.
And I didn't know if you, in your experience with these kinds of economic sales development, or economic development sales taxes, excuse me, whether or not the empowering language had to be specific enough to a development that we really didn't have the option of spending that raised money on anything other than Manchester Renewal.
I'm not ducking you, because I just really can't answer. It's a legal
Okay.
question, so.
I actually
just
looked
weigh
at
in
that
on
a while
that?
back, Dave.
That's the only question.
Yeah, so I looked at it a while back, and I'm sure Kevin will look it up right now, but it actually, it's similar to the storm in the parks. It's very broad.
Okay.
I mean, economic development is defined as pretty much anything the board thinks might lead to additional revenue.
So the description language that we're required to use as we go out to, if we vote to do this, as we go out to ask our residents to vote on this additional sales tax, we don't have to be geographically descriptive of where it's being spent.
Actually, I think Kevin's got it, so.
Right. No,
I'm
sir,
sorry,
you don't.
Brandon.
Okay.
The statute has the following language: the ballot of submission for the tax authorized in the section shall be in substantially the following form: shall the city of Brentwood impose a sales tax at a rate of 0.5% for economic development purposes, yes or no?
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Brandon?
But when we're talking about
I would add
the,
that, if I may, the statute also requires that an economic development sales tax board be established and projects to be funded be run by that board to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. So there is a process for engagement, and that board also includes people on other taxing districts, school district, for instance.
Right.
So folks will have an engagement in that. Now, the decision of what to fund rests with the board, but there is the Board of Aldermen. But there is, you will establish, if the tax is approved, establish an economic development sales tax advisory board as well.
If we chose to be more specific in the language that we adopt, are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to be more specific?
It depends on what we're talking about, okay? I would
He's
not
talking
recommend
about on
it
the
to-
ballot, I think.
Right, I'm talking about the ballot.
I know, but I would not recommend it for a couple of reasons. Number one, there is a 50-word limit imposed by the Board of Election Commissioners out of, I don't know what authority, but they're trying to do it. So we don't have a lot to play with to be very informative.
Okay.
Number two, if there is a limitation on the ballot, you cannot zig and zag 25 years from now, if circumstances warrant. So,
Can the specificity come from some sort of a rationale that accompanies the ballot measure on the ballot, or no?
I do not think informative materials, yeah, thank you. Informative materials would be binding on the elected bodies in the future. I would add, by the way, the statute has specific allocations required, okay? Limitations, what you can't use it for, maximum percentage being used for other things, and describes the type of projects that can be funded. So we're gonna be constrained by the statute in any event.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Weggie, thank you for being patient.
That's okay. Anyone else?
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So, just for clarification, what we're saying is that we have the ability to fund up to 80 million, but that we would not necessarily need to use it because we're targeting this project to be 74 million. I heard nothing about we would use any additional funds for something else, and I think that would be very important that we are specific that we're not planning to use this for something else. So if this project comes on exactly at 74 million, we wouldn't say, hey, we've got 6 million left, let's go, you know.
My only
right.
point is that we're gonna have according to them, $3.2 million in revenue, and under the 30-year scenario, we'll only be spending $2.4 million on debt service. So there'll be an additional amount of money coming in for as long as the sales tax exists, under that last scenario.
Yeah, he's saying under this, if I might.
Yeah.
What he's saying, if we did it for 30 years, the tax went up for 30 years, so we're using annually 2.4 million of the 3.2.
To service that debt.
That
Right.
leaves 800,000.
Right.
And he was saying, I think his question, I think, was, can we do that?
Right. That's exactly my question.
But when would the debt service be set of the length of that?
At the time, and certificates are actually issued.
I mean, when you start with 17 years, because we're making 3.2 million on the half cent,
Well, 17 years would have some benefits. One benefit is the debt only goes out 17 years, so one would think the interest rate would be lower by only going out 17 years. Second of all, it's paid off much quicker. You save, well, you're paying less interest. And so there are some benefits of doing that. But back to my example with the homeowner, why do some people go out a longer period of time? Because they want flexibility. They want to have that, their earnings to spend on other things. So some cities view it the same way. I'm not saying you would or wouldn't, but
It also protects against major sales tax producers relocating or fire.
what about in terms of the specificity, whatever, you know, in terms of the dollar amount, can we also put a time box on it that says that this sales tax would exist for this length of time or until the funding had been set for this?
Yes. You can, I don't think there's anything in the statute that would prohibit you putting a sunset.
Alderman Lake?
I'll lead to this, but I would ask Mr. Lady, if we have a sunset which is not tied to retirement of the debt, would that increase the risk?
the sunset, I assume, in your example, would go past the final maturity date, or at least to the maturity date?
Right, if it's temporary.
I don't think we're going to find buyers for our bonds if we don't have our sunset at least to the maturity date.
I understand, but if it's set to a date specific as opposed to the
Right.
anticipated
That's fine.
retirement date.
As long as it's after the maturity
Yeah,
date.
no, I see what you're saying, I'm sorry.
Okay, following up on that question, would a sunset clause be in the ballot language? Or would that be something that the board establishes when we go out for the bonds?
Good question.
Which is it?
I
Since
would-
I got a 50-word limit.
Yeah, I think if you're going to put a sunset, you'd ought to be on the ballot.
Okay.
And I don't think the statutory language would prohibit it being on the ballot.
Ballot.
But if you don't put it on the ballot, you're not going to get the benefit of it in
There's
terms
some,
of.
there's some sale to it, to try to convince voters that going this route would be a good thing.
Alderman Dimmitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it permissible to ask Craig questions at this point?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. Back to the overall cost of the project, I believe it was in January, when we had the workshop, the number came out 70 million, something like that, whatever. And I don't think it was 74, so you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But
It was 74.6.
was
Yeah.
it back in January? Okay, so
Yeah.
that number has not moved at all.
I wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the exact same number.
Okay, well then I'm gonna ask the chairman, since you wrote that.
Yeah.
There was a plus or minus figure in there also, wasn't there, on the estimate?
Well, there was there was in the numbers that we had from, who were they called at the time?
CH2M.
Yeah, CH2M. There was a confidence interval expressed in the level of engineering and hence carried over to the cost.
Mhm.
And I believe that confidence interval was, Craig, 20%?
Yeah, 20 or 30%.
Yeah,
approximately.
and that was one of the things that was brought out when we took it to another firm for review, is that the confidence interval was actually smaller than what CH2M Hill had put on it.
Okay.
So, you know, there was I don't know that we committed that the budgetary numbers were on that same confidence
Right.
interval, but knowing that the engineering would drive the budget, we were assuming that that was roughly our confidence.
Right, well, that was my recollection, 'cause I remember 90 million possibly being out there. Worst case scenario, when you add in the 20 to 30%, if there's an additional cost, if we're off by that. But what I was getting to is, I believed at that workshop, there was some discussions, well, if we get going on this project, we're really not going to be able to recalculate the costs of construction until we get, I think they said boots on the ground or something to that effect, which meant, you know, we got to start acquiring properties, we get engineers out there, they start doing their calculations, because right now it's based on a computer model. They felt they could give us a more accurate figure once they get their boots on the ground. Now, when Alderman Weggie asked you, there hasn't been any adjustment to this overall construction cost now, right? We're 7 or 8 months past the workshop. We're still looking at 74, but my question to you is, when would you anticipate that the engineers are going to be able to come back to you and say, here's a better estimate of the true cost of construction for this project? You think it'll be February when they get done, March?
So it's different answers for different projects. So the Manchester Road improvements currently are at a 60% design.
Okay.
And we have recently received the estimate from them that we're currently under review. That'll be presented to the staff in the next couple of weeks. But currently it's looking like the projects are coming actually below budget, which is good news. So that estimate is got roughly 10% contingency that's built into that number. So that's Manchester Road improvements.
Okay.
Deer Creek flood mitigation, the next estimate, that is accurate about getting boots on the ground. The next estimate will come in winter, which would be January, February of next year. And that's because they do need to survey the work and do some borings to get more information, actually estimate rather than models. But we are carrying contingencies that are built into that $74 million number to accommodate for those risks. As we learn more about the project, we reduce the contingency because we know more
Right.
information. So as I mentioned, Manchester Road improvements, we're carrying a lot smaller contingency than we are for the GRG connector, because that's in phase 2, and we don't even have the ability to pay for boots on the ground right now.
And the phase 1 project it's bigger than the phase 2.
Correct.
Taking out the GRG connector.
Correct.
Just the flood mitigation.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing from you is by February or March of 2019, we should have a better handle on the cost of the flood mitigation for phase 1.
Correct.
And so it's possible that we're going to know by that point the cost could be substantially more than what we thought just for the flood mitigation. But conversely, it could be substantially less than what we were thinking.
I guess, yeah, there is some
Substantial
risk.
is relative. It could be.
Yeah, substantially is relative. Like I mentioned, there are contingencies in there to accommodate for risk. But yeah, I mean, if we found something that's just completely out of the realm of what we would think we would find, there is risk there that we will find with boots on the ground doing subsurface work.
So like buried pirate treasure, for example?
That would be great.
Yeah.
No, I've looked.
So lost city.
We passed an ordinance to
That's
prevent
right,
you from
right.
digging things up. I'm sorry, but we passed that
Well,
ordinance.
only in the parks. Well, if I could ask Jim, then I think another question. I think you may have answered it, but for my simpleton brain, for lack of a better term, this net 41 is kind of like, for me, it'd be like a line of credit. You know, it's available, but we don't pay on it except for whatever we draw down on it?
No, that's not the way it works.
Okay.
So let me explain. So when we do a bond issue, I'm gonna use the Series 2018.
Mhm.
Okay, let's just use it as an example. And we talked about this, and these numbers will sound familiar to you. Okay, let's use it as an example.
Okay.
So the amount of certificates that were issued back in April was 43,390,000.
Right.
So that was what we refer to as the par amount.
Mhm.
Somebody was out there. How much was available for the project cost was 39,225,000.
Right.
What's the difference in those numbers? You all asked that question.
Most of it's Jim's salary.
That was not the answer.
2 years of Jim's salary.
The answer is that the difference was the debt service reserve. That's 3.2 million. That's most of it. We had capitalized interest because you may recall that we didn't want to draw from city funds for the October payment.
Right.
That's upcoming. So we set aside almost 700,000 for that, and the rest were costs associated with doing the bond issue. So when we talk about net, it's a good question you're asking. The net, John, what would you ask the net? The net would be to do
About 44 million.
Okay.
So 44 million would be issued, and the difference would be the same kinds of things I just mentioned.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then
So let me just finish
Yeah.
one last point. So it's not a line of credit. There would be then sitting, if this example was exactly right, there'd be $41 million sitting in a project fund that you could draw on, and the trustee would be holding it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, that's where I need to follow up then. So hypothetically, we're into February or March of 2019. This goes on the ballot at some point in time. Let's assume it passes and we get the net 41 million plus the 39 that we already have. We get the 80 million, right?
In that example.
And
yes.
we get a revised number, and let's say the revised number comes down to 60 million total cost
Okay.
instead of 74, right? Now, we've got 80 million in COPS out there for a project that's only gonna cost us 60 million. But we will be paying, servicing that extra 20 million, right?
Right.
So what do we do about that? 'Cause
Okay, that's a very good question. So I'm not your bond attorney, okay, and I'm not gonna pretend like I am an attorney, but I've been around this stuff long enough to know I think I can answer your question. And John, jump in. So in that example you used, there would be excess money sitting in a project fund. And I think we'd be okay, again, I'm not the tax attorney or your bond counsel, but I think we'd be okay because there was a reasonable expectation that we might need that amount of money for your project, okay? So we'd be okay there, in my opinion. So, but your question is, what would we do with that excess money? If we really don't need it for the, it's all said and done, we don't need that money for the project. I think we'd build in a feature into the documents that would allow us to redeem bonds with that excess, or certificate, I keep referring to it as bonds, redeem some of the certificates earlier because we do not need that money for the project cost.
And you don't think that would be any problem doing that?
Again, I'm not your bond
Yeah,
counsel.
that would be a
Mark Grimm.
Mark Grimm,
Okay.
Mark
But
Grimm
I think
question.
that's what would happen.
Okay.
I mean, I can tell you that Mark would give all the legal disclaimers and then he would say yes.
Okay. Okay. So thanks for the clarification, because I was thinking more like a
Sure.
line of credit where you don't unless you draw down. What you're saying is we get the full amount, we're gonna pay, we're gonna service that. And the only issue then is if it does come under less than what we think, that excess funds, those excess funds we have, could we use those then to pay down those
Some of the
COPs early?
debt, yes.
Okay.
And the one thing I'd like to just add to Jim's answer, because I think it is important, is that, you know, this money's not sitting in a zero interest account. We have a treasury function that is, you know, it's not earning a lot under today's interest rates, but it is earning something. And what we're actually paying on that money is the spread between what we borrowed it at and what we're earning on it. It's not the full amount of that. So, you know, that, again, it may only be a point, but a point's a point, right?
Okay.
So,
There's some offset.
yeah, of course, right.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Locknoy.
Can I ask a question to Craig, please?
Sure, Craig?
Let's say the board decides to put this on the April ballot, and we're all standing there going up to vote, and citizens, and matter of fact, this side of the board will be up for reelection at that time. What would we be able to point to in phase one that we can say is gone, that has been completed down there? Demolition, acquiring a property, something physically that the voters can see that phase one has been worked on, and now we're looking for more money for phase two.
So next April, on phase one, there would be a reasonable amount of properties acquired. Not all of them, but a reasonable amount of them. And then the design would be far enough along to, be able to provide some actual plans of the improvements. And then finally, we would have all the renderings completed that showed the before and after, which would probably be the most impactful for the citizens. But unfortunately, by next April, there won't be any track codes or any big trucks out there that are doing work to show a physical impact, but the renderings will provide a big impact to the citizens.
I think will also be, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the pedestrian tunnel under Manchester will be well into the 50% engineering phase at that point, right? That's when they transition to what, 80% or 90%?
Correct. The Manchester Road improvements are at 60% design right now, and then they'll be working for the next, year as they go through property acquisitions on
You
that.
will be able to promise with confidence that the pedestrian tunnel under Manchester
Yes.
will be in by 2022 or whatever it is.
Correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Wiggy.
I'm not sure who this question is to, but so it sounds like the half cent, it's kind of like a factor safety on top of factor safety, right? So we have basically 80 million of total funding possible with the certificates of participation. This, if we run it out a 30-year, it seems like there's multiple things here, right? If 2.4 million can service that debt, that 40 million debt for 30 years, then we could put a 3/8 cent increase on and still cover it.
If you plan on, it's really just a question of this, right? If you do a half-cent tax, you earn $3.2 million per year.
Right?
That translates into $41 million of net proceeds at whatever time frame you want. You could also translate that into $30 million of net proceeds at some shorter period of time, right? If you wanted to go for a lesser amount, you could say, yeah, okay, we're going to do lesser amount and we're going to do it for, X amount of time. So it's time and money.
Yeah, it just seems like half a cent is a big jump, right? We have this great economic engine, and is this gonna sputter it out? And we've seen our sales tax revenue stagnant for at least the last 3 years in Ways and Means. You would hope that this would increase sales tax revenue as this is successful a couple years down the road, and this would be a non-issue. Our certificates of participation, I think, are expiring. The first tranche, I forget the date, but you would have some, contingency built in there that we could cover it over the 30 years if necessary, right? It seems like there would be other contingencies, and we've already got factors of safety, and in my opinion, we should do everything we can to bring forward the smallest number possible on this.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question I'm struggling with is, well, first of all, is there anything that's going to be asked of this board to decide
Tonight, yes. The approval of the community engagement task force members. So
Okay.
we have updated that list. And in essence, we're asking if the board thinks that there's value in completing the entire project, and that so you all can continue to have discussion between now and January, when we will ask the board to vote on legislation approving us placing this on the ballot. But we want to begin the education process right now. And I have Dr. Rod Wright in the green shirt, so he can talk to you a little bit about the process for educating the community engagement task force. So we're looking for authorization to begin that effort tonight. So that's the only action being asked for the board.
Okay.
Whether you want to sunset or do this at a later date, you'll have an opportunity to talk about that and vote on that.
But the 39 million, the net proceeds from the 2018 COPS, that was being used, I
Right.
thought, for phase one flood mitigation, and what was the other thing?
Manchester Road.
Manchester Road, okay. But we just heard from Craig that construction is not going to begin on phase one until
May of 19.
May of next year.
19.
So why would we look at putting this on the April ballot when we're starting construction and we haven't even used up the first $39 million? Why wouldn't we wait to go out and do that economic development sales? Yes, Kevin?
First of all, it takes 6 months to start receiving revenue after the election. Okay? Sales tax does not go into effect until the start of the second calendar quarter after you give notice to the Department of Revenue.
Which is different than the original COPS that we got. Because when we approved that in March or whatever, we got the money like the next day. It wasn't
Not
that fast.
exactly.
It was pretty fast.
And it's June.
The sales tax.
That's because Jim wrote us a check and then he just covered it with the rest.
You're talking about two different things.
But the sales tax revenue doesn't come in.
Right. I got
So-
you.
You have a long time before you see any money.
To fund that additional
Right,
COPS, the 44, 45 million.
If you wait from April of 2019, if you pass it in April 2019, you won't see any dollars until December of 2019. Because it starts with
Okay.
the last quarter of the year, which is sales beginning October 1st, collected by merchants in October, paid to Department of Revenue in November, and distributed to you in December.
Okay.
Capturing the all-important holiday shopping season.
And the other thing, if I may, with respect to some of the questions asked, and Mr. Leahy, I will defer to his expertise, but the amount of coverage you have, the certainty of a revenue stream, will affect the amount of interest you pay. So if you have the absolute bare minimum tax rate, which is a political decision for you all to make, don't get me wrong, okay? But if there is some coverage, some freeboard in the projections, that will translate to a lower tax rate than a tax rate set just to hit the target because of the risk of fluctuation. So that's a risk factor that Mr. Leahy can attest to. And in terms of what do we do with extra money, God bless it, should happen from your lips to, the risk is getting into, and this is why you pay bond lawyers a lot of money, not me, is getting into arbitrage, which is the use of tax-exempt bonds to make money for the city, which is when it all goes south and everybody gets indicted. But if there is a prepayment privilege in the transaction, again, that affects the attractiveness of the bond, and there can be a price distinction. You'll pay for that privilege, but it is something, Mr. Leahy can tell you how much you tend to pay, how many basis points the market tags that with, but that protects you against getting caught in an upside-down situation with respect to arbitrage. I'm sorry.
No, that's all. I agree with all of that. Just wanted to mention one other thing that's related to what he said, and that when the 2018 certificates were issued, remember those were rated. And Bola and Karen and the mayor and John and myself talked to the rating agency about that. They ask a lot of questions about what he's talking about. What kind of excess money? What other projects is the city planning to do? Were they planning to go out with for another issuance? We talked about this possibility with them. So when we go forward again, we're going to go back to the rating agency. We want to have good answers to those same questions again. So it's not just the purchasers of these certificates. We want to maintain your rating. And part of the sizing that went into effect wasn't a coincidence with that earlier 2018 issuance. We were sizing it with coverage, with an understanding of the city's projects, and every effort to try and maintain your rating, get the best possible rating. So all of those factors were taken into consideration.
I don't want to minimize the importance of the political decision to not tax the public more, but there's a trade-off to some extent. I just want to make sure everybody had the full picture.
Would there be a concern about possibly we not get the same rating for this second tranche?
It's always possible. I mean, you really don't know. They weigh everything. They weigh the city's balances, your debt policies. They'll look at everything at that point in time. So we would like to believe, and we have a confidence level that we'd be able to maintain the same rating, but there's no assurances of that, so.
Otros preguntas? I've got a Spanish student living with me now.
Yes, you do.
Other questions? Alderman Wiggy, I'm assuming that was yawn, not a, all right. Stretch, got it, okay. All right, so I'm to the point in our agenda where I think we've just had a discussion. I
Yes,
don't know that we need to have any
absolutely.
more.
Not necessarily. If you have any questions for Rod, he's here to talk about the history of how referendums are passing. The highest rate since, if you want to step up, Rod. So the Board of Aldermen approved an agreement with Rod Wright, President, CEO of Unicom Art. A little bit about your history, bio, real quick.
Yeah, Unicom Arc is, we're actually approaching our 50th year. It'll happen in 2020. We do community engagement programs, public opinion research, referendum planning for school districts and cities. Well, school districts all over the country, mostly municipalities here. It's kind of old home week here because I've worked with Jim longer than we both care to remember. We both worked on the governor's race in the state of Missouri in 1984. And neither of our candidates won, so we remained friends, but we were not working for the same candidate.
Who recommended these guys?
A long time ago. We've been friends ever since.
The guy who did get elected at the end.
We have done a lot of, the one thing I just want to add is a lot of times when ballot proposals fail, it's not because people are opposed to what you're trying to do. They just don't get it. They don't understand it. So part of what we try to do with our community engagement programs is make sure that when people go vote on election day, if that's April, that they get it, they understand it. And the interesting issue, you've been talking a lot about money and phasing in and all of that, which are all issues that voters tend not to care as much about as they care about kind of need and benefits. And if they understand the need and if they see the benefits, kind of the amount of money becomes much less important, particularly when you're talking about a sales tax where, as you saw from the PGAV presentation, the amount of money we're talking about is pretty negligible. And in this city, if I live in Webster Groves, if I'm going by a case study of one, you get a lot of money from non-residents because you certainly get more than your fair share from me. So part of what the program or the engagement program is designed to do is to get a lot of two-way communication going. What we're thinking about is somewhat modeled after a program we did in Rock Hill that led to their successful project to build their new municipal facilities. I just toured them, by the way, they're great. Where we, one, want to get a lot of communications going to the community, something to talk about, but also get input back from them so they feel like they can weigh in on some of the key decisions that you have to make. And then part of our job is to package that input that we get and deliver it to this group prior to you making the decision to place it on the ballot. But the goal of the overall program is to raise considerably the understanding of the issue and to provide some input. And again, that's what we did in Rock Hill. We have an initial meeting scheduled for next Monday. And the point I want to make about that is that a lot of the details about community engagement, we're going to let that group make some decisions. They need to take ownership of it. So we'll go in and talk about best practices and what we've seen that works around the country, but they get to decide some key things. They need to take ownership of it, and our experience has been is that the more they take ownership of it, the greater success it has for the city and the people that have created the program, and so that's kind of what we're all about. You've talked a little bit about election dates, April or later, and I know you know this, but I will mention that there is only one regularly scheduled election ballot in 2019, and that's in April. there is no June, August, or November ballot. That does not mean, the way I understand it from what I saw, that you can't create a special election. But sometimes that creates some controversy because you gotta write a check to the election authorities. And
Not
I don't
June.
know how much that is. It's not a lot of money.
The
Mr.
legislature
O'Keefe
gets
knows that.
canceled June.
I'm sorry.
The legislature has canceled June elections, so
Okay.
it's only August and November. And yes, you can get on.
So it would be August or November in 19, but those would be special election ballots, meaning you have to write a check to the Board of Election Commission.
Well, you write a check either way. It might-
Yeah, but it's more, right?
It's a bigger
Yeah,
check.
bigger. I'm sorry. I'm have dangerous level of knowledge on it. So with that, I know it's a busy night. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
All right.
I did this when I taught. I numb people into submission. Thank you very much. We look forward to working on it.
All right, so that moves us to 10C. In your packets, there is a list of individuals who have volunteered to participate in the Community Engagement Planning Committee. And so that would be the group of people that Unicom would be working with to go out and sort of spearhead the community engagement effort. Say again? No, it's okay. I mean, I assume you all can read.
It's been updated.
So,
Yes, the list has been updated.
yeah, I think Bola sent out an email about that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Have all these people been approached about this and asked?
We have, so a good number of these people were recommended by the Board of Aldermen. So I'd like to take a guess that maybe you all talked to them beforehand, but we also have been calling all of them. And there are a few that we are yet to reach, and we hope to do that prior to Monday. But if you have other recommendations, and I think I kind of shared that with the alderman when I met with you, we are happy if the mayor is open to that, to add more names to the.
I know the ones that I personally recommended were like dying to be on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've had some of those since
'Cause nobody
last
called me
year.
and
No,
asked
I mean,
me.
seriously, they were like, when can we start working on this?
Yeah, I think, because I have some names, but I haven't been able to confirm to them that they would like to, and I think it would be good to get some
Well,
flexibility.
this is by no means an exclusive list or an
Correct.
exclusive club.
You know, could we approve or, you know, make a motion for this with the ability to just add people as
Oh, yeah,
necessary? I mean, it seems like the more than the merrier on this.
Yeah,
I guess I
mean,
would make a
re-
motion to
Really,
approve.
I don't, our city attorney can put me right, but I think this, since this is an ad hoc committee, I can kind of form one and appoint people and, I'm doing this by, the hope is that by doing it with you all's
Yes.
consent and approval, then you all can help us get it going. So I don't think there's any need to be over formal about it.
Okay, then I would motion that we approve the appointments of this and move out with this.
Second.
All right, so motion and a second to approve the list of individuals to serve on the
Community Engagement Task
Community
Force.
Engagement Committee, thank you. And I'd like to point out that, I guess, the motion I heard was that this list not be limiting to the membership, but that it be open to further appointees as may come before the board, yeah?
So is the motion to approve the board including at least the
At least the yeah, thank you, Kevin.
However you want to word it, but
You're
basically,
the
can we
master
add
of the
people to
English
it?
language, once again. Much appreciated. All right, any discussion?
Yeah, there's one name, the Woods family. Is there not an ordinance in the city code that prevents a family from being on the same committee?
No,
I've never seen it.
not like this.
No. It's for employees, hiring relatives reporting to one another.
Thank you.
But not for committees, no.
And again, folks, my take on this is we want as many of these folks as we can get,
Yes.
right? If they got energy and they're coming to do something, they're very welcome.
Okay.
Dave?
There were prior forms of this motion that I saw where the last sentence said, with an eye towards putting language together by January and having it on the April ballot. Is that part of this motion, just as a
No.
point of clarification?
No, it is not. But it will lead to that point where we will come back before the board and say, okay, are you ready to place this on the April ballot?
As long as you keep it couched in those terms, I don't have a problem with this
Yeah.
motion. I do have a problem with the timing. It's the only problem I have with what we're contemplating here. We have taken on $40 million, practically $40 million of debt. with an eye towards paying that debt service with a combination of belt tightening and some rearranging of particular funds to the tune of $2.4 million a year. And we have not gone through a fiscal year and done that successfully yet. And I'm just concerned that we're adding potentially on another, we're doubling that debt, admittedly with a repayment source, and we wouldn't, I'm imagining we wouldn't go forward if this ballot measure fails. But I am concerned about the timing of this, and that combined with the fact that we have abandoned any efforts, at least temporarily, to try and put that use tax back on the ballot, a tax that could have benefited from this gentleman's help, I think, at the last election, because I think it failed because of widespread ignorance as to what it was. And I think that despite the idea that we initially thought that would only bring in $20,000 or $30,000 a year in revenue, I think we're finding out from our neighbors in Maplewood that that number would be considerably higher, and that it would be worthwhile to explore that. And I wonder about the possibility of putting two tax measures on, or ostensibly tax measures on a ballot at the same time. I'm concerned about the timing of this. I'm not concerned about the project. I believe wholeheartedly in this project. I think the work that's been done to this point has been great, and I believe this is a neglected area of the city that deserves the benefit of what we're trying to accomplish here. My only concern is timing. I'll leave it at that.
Can I address it for a second? My recommendation would be to wait and see what kind of input you get. No decision has to be made tonight about an April ballot, and over the next several months, we're going to be getting input from the community. The way I think about it is to try to put together a calendar of activities that allows for an April election, but does not necessarily and inevitably lead to that until you hear the input, and that's what we did in Rock Hill. Certainly the city administrator and the board of administration had an election date in mind, but if we had gotten input from the community that said no and hell no, we would have gone back to the drawing board to try to figure out, we need more time. Because I'm a passionate believer, having been around elections for a long time now, you do it once and you do it right. You don't come, and it sounds like to me you've got one that you may need to bring back. And so that would be my recommendation, is that we, again, put together a calendar of activities that allow for you to make that decision. But you make that decision after you get the input.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other discussion on the pending motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item number 11 on tonight's agenda, citizens' comments. If you have anything you'd like to say to the Board of Aldermen, please come forward, state your name and address. You'll be given at least 3 minutes to do so. Don't all come at once. There's plenty of time. And we'll move along.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for the Board of Aldermen special meeting from September 4th to be adjourned.
Second.
Oh, moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? We're adjourned.